Christine Ann Nelson was born December 14, 1949, to Floyd and Eleanor Horn. At the age of 36, she lived in Eugene, Oregon, and worked as a secretary for the University of Oregon. She was described as an extremely outgoing and athletic person that enjoyed swimming, windsurfing, baseball, and horseback riding. She and her husband, Philip Nelson, were having marital problems, and the couple separated, but he begged her to come back. Soon after, on August 22, 1986, the two would leave Oregon and head to Carson City, Nevada, to pick up two Studebakers her husband bought for his car collection. She is known to have arrived safely in Nevada, but no one else besides Philip reported seeing her back home in Oregon. Philip says they went home together afterwards, and Christine drove off on her motorcycle early the next morning on August 24th and never returned. Philip reported her missing the next day, and authorities have no evidence besides his statements to prove that Christine ever made it home from Carson City, Nevada. Christine's motorcycle, along with her helmet, was found shortly after her disappearance outside the Portable Rock Productions quarry in Cottage Grove, Oregon, off I-5 near the Saginaw exit. This location is about 15 miles from their home. Philip stated he believed his wife had run away with another man, and some of Christine's relatives concurred, but other members of her family thought she had disappeared under suspicious circumstances and may have been murdered. Christine's co-workers stated she often had bruises on her body and had told them Philip abused her, but he was never charged in connection with any of the domestic violence incidents. Their marriage was troubled, and the couple separated a few months prior to Christine's disappearance. She had moved back in with her parents, but when Philip begged her to come back, she made a compromise and started spending weekends with him at their house. By the time of her disappearance, Christine was still undecided as to whether to end her marriage. Philip was initially cooperative with the police investigation, but he eventually refused to take a polygraph, hired an attorney, and stopped talking to authorities. In 1993, Christine's mother, Eleanor Horn, sued Philip in a civil suit to have him declare Christine legally dead to prevent him from benefiting from her life insurance and retirement holdings. She claimed that he had killed her daughter, hidden her body, and then moved to Alaska to avoid being prosecuted. Oregon law states that a murderer cannot benefit from their victim's estate. They eventually reached a settlement, and although Philip did not admit guilt, he did release any interest in his missing wife's estate, and she was finally declared legally dead. Her family believes that Philip killed her and disposed of her body either somewhere in the Jasper area where they lived or in Nevada during their trip. Pam Wallace, Christine's younger sister and only remaining relative, has believed for 35 years that her brother-in-law killed her sister in a fit of rage over their deteriorating marriage. As of today, no one has been arrested for her disappearance and possible murder, and this case remains unsolved. William Dale Gunn was born February 2, 1969, and was nicknamed Billy, and lived with his mom, stepdad, and sister in Klamath Falls, Oregon. When Billy was learning to drive, his stepfather, Albert Gunn Jr., would take him for drives on old logging roads to give him practice. On June 15, 1984, Billy and Albert set out on the Saturday morning for more driving practice. Prior to leaving, he asked his mom if he could stay the night at his friend's home that night, but she told him no. Albert returned home alone that afternoon, saying he had went ahead and dropped Billy off at the friend's apartment despite the mother's wishes. He told his wife that Billy was supposed to spend the night and then return home by dinner time the next evening at 6 p.m. Usually, if Billy was going to be late, he would call, but the next day, by 6 p.m., there was no word from him, and his mother began to worry. She called the friend's house where he was supposed to have stayed, and that's when she was told Billy was not there and had not showed up there the day before either. No one at the apartment complex, including the friend he had supposedly stayed with, remembered seeing Billy that day. Billy basically disappeared, and he has never been heard from again. His sister Deanna believes Albert was involved in her brother's disappearance and describes him as a violent man who had abused the family for over 10 years. He allegedly sexually abused Billy's sister and shot Billy with a BB gun and punished him by making him sit on the fence in nothing but his underwear in the middle of the winter. She speculates that Albert murdered him and disposed of his body in the woods. However, authorities searched for months and could never find him. Albert did, however, serve a prison term for the abuse of his stepdaughter, and after his release from prison, he was jailed once again for stalking his sister. He later died in 2004, and sadly, Billy's mother died in 2009. So the question still remains, what happened the day Albert took Billy for driving practice? Sadly, as of today, Billy has never been found, and this case remains unsolved. Ethan William Swiger was severely injured in a car accident as a young child. The accident caused him to suffer from a mental disability, seizures, a severe limp, and limited mobility. He lived in Klamath Falls, Oregon, and on the morning of December 16, 2019, he left the Klamath Falls Gospel Mission between 5 and 5:30 a.m. After leaving, he would ask to use the bathroom at the Holiday Market on North H Street, but since the business wasn't open yet, the 22-year-old was directed to the city park at Main Street and 11th Street and has never been heard from again. His family last heard from him the day before he was last seen. He has been known to frequent Albertsons and the Gospel Mission in Klamath Falls. His phone has not been used since the day before he went missing, which is very unusual for Ethan. Ethan does not drive or have full use of his hands. According to police, he may have mentioned to someone that he intended to travel to Grants Pass, but there has been no indication that he ever arrived there. He was seen before he went missing with an older man in a 2000 yellow Ford Mustang and a raised rear end, and investigators still want to talk to this man. Ethan may have left Klamath Falls with Kelly Conrad, who was arrested in the Sun River, Oregon area around 2 a.m. on New Year's Eve. It is believed that Ethan is more than likely in the area between Klamath Falls and Sun River, Oregon. Ethan was last seen wearing a dirty brown sweatshirt, camouflage pants, and a yellow raincoat. He is roughly 6 feet tall, weighing between 145 and 165 pounds. It is not believed that a person could live long without shelter in the frigid temperatures of Oregon in the winter. It is also out of character for Ethan not to stay in contact with his family. He was allegedly with a girl named Helen Bivens the night he disappeared, according to social media. She has been questioned by police, but it didn't help in finding him. His family still seeks answers, and as of today, Ethan remains missing and this case remains unsolved. Shausha Latine Henson was born January 25, 2001, and her older sister, Shaina Ashley Kirkpatrick, was born April 22, 1999. On April 4, 2001, 4-month-old Shausha and 23-month-old Shaina would leave their home in Portland, Oregon with their 21-year-old mother, Kimyala Henson. They had plans to travel to British Columbia, Canada, with Kim's friend, Christine Noel Mayer, and a man that Christine introduced as her husband, Curtis. Christine's husband was actually Frank Oring, who was a fugitive from Missouri. Frank was wanted after allegedly hiring a man to kill his then-pregnant wife and was scheduled to stand trial on March 7th, the month before, but he never showed. His parents said he left Missouri on March 6th with Christine. Frank's ex-wife, Benita, reported that he was the leader of a group of Satanists in Missouri, and Christine was allegedly a member. She said that he was a high priest and that Christine was a priestess who followed him into Satanism starting around 1994. Instead of heading north to Canada, they went to Sacramento, California to get Kim's birth certificate, and it is assumed that she believed she needed it to enter into Canada. Christine and Frank may have been the ones who convinced her of that. On April 5th, someone picked up Kim's birth certificate in Sacramento, and that night the 3 adults and 2 children spent the night in Shasta Lodge in Redding, California. Sadly, after that night, the children were never seen again. On April 20th, 2001, Frank and Christine were discovered in a car at a picnic area near Collier Seminole State Park in Naples, Florida. Christine had been killed by a gunshot wound to the temple. Frank was seriously wounded from a gunshot wound to the head and then died at a hospital. Authorities determined that Frank shot himself and his girlfriend in a murder-suicide. Frank left behind letters detailing the couple's plan to steal Kim's birth certificate. Christine had assumed Kim's identity in Las Vegas, Nevada, shortly after they met Kim and her children in Oregon. Also found in the car was literature related to Satanism. On April 28, 2001, Kim's remains were found near Nixon, Nevada in the desert near a rest area by a motorist who had pulled off the road. She had been beaten and shot several times, and authorities believe Frank and Christine were responsible. Unfortunately, an extensive search of the area produced no clues as to the whereabouts of Kim's daughters. Testing was done on a blood-stained hatchet found in Christine and Frank's car. The blood was positively identified as Kim's, but neither Shausha nor Shaina's blood was present. Authorities believe that Christine and Frank traveled to Florida alone during April 2001. Florida law enforcement officials found Kim's wallet and credit cards in a car parked at the rest area and traced transactions that they believe were fraudulently signed by Christine. The children's car seats and luggage were missing, but investigators found a few articles of clothing and diapers in the vehicle. It was determined that Christine and Frank had traveled to Florida through Nevada, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and the motel receipts indicate that the girls were not with them at the time. Shaina and Shausha's car seats have never been recovered, and their birth certificates are still missing. Authorities do not know if Christine and Frank harmed the children or sold them. Shaina and Shausha could still be alive, and in 2021, they would be 20 and 22 years old, but as of today, they are still missing and this case remains unsolved. Thomas Dean Gibson was born July 5, 1988, and lived in rural Azalea, Oregon, and was nicknamed Tommy. On March 18, 1991, little 2-year-old Tommy was playing in the front yard of his home about 11:30 a.m. His father, Larry Gibson, the Douglas County Deputy Sheriff at the time, told authorities he took a jog around the family's property during the late morning hours that day, while his 4-year-old daughter was to keep an eye on Tommy. He claimed that before leaving the property for a jog, he shot at a cat near the area where Tommy was playing but missed it. He then continued on his jog, and when he returned about 45 minutes later, he and his wife Judith realized that Tommy was missing. They called law enforcement later in the day to search the property, and Larry was reportedly told not to report to work at the sheriff's office, but apparently he dressed in his uniform and left the property for about 25 minutes during the investigation. He stated that his 4-year-old daughter, Karen, witnessed an unidentified couple pull into their driveway and abduct Tommy. While people searched for Tommy, Larry sat at home, and at one point he told the searchers to give up and go home because it was snowing. Authorities believe that Larry had shot at a stray cat and killed the animal because a deceased cat was located on the property near where Tommy had been playing. Investigators believed that the bullet traveled through the cat and struck Tommy as he played, killing him. They theorized that Larry noticed Tommy's body after returning from his jog and buried the child in an effort to conceal the crime. He also lied to investigators during an interview with the FBI, telling them that he never left his residence at all during the day that Tommy vanished. Though Larry's patrol vehicle was not initially searched, it was subsequently discovered that his odometer had registered 7 miles that were unaccounted for on the day of Tommy's disappearance. Larry explained that the unaccounted miles were registered when he drove to the nearby rest area searching for Tommy. Within the first 6 weeks of the investigation, Larry became the prime suspect. He maintained his innocence throughout the investigation and eventually resigned from the sheriff's office and moved to Montana the year after the incident. He and his wife separated in 1994, and she took their 3 other children and moved back to Oregon. Larry's estranged wife and his daughter later changed their stories to authorities and said that his daughter witnessed her father hitting Tommy. Allegedly, Larry then put the child's body in a black plastic garbage bag, put the bag in the back of his patrol car, and drove away. Larry's half-sister, Debbie, testified against him at trial, stating that after Tommy went missing, she received a frantic phone call from him in which he confessed to killing Tommy and telling her he may need money to post bail after his arrest. She also claimed that when Tommy's sister and mother stayed with her at her home in Iowa after Tommy's disappearance, his sister made a comment about being scared that her father would put her in a big hole like he had Tommy. She also described seeing her father beating Tommy outside before he disappeared. Prosecutors argued that Larry had a history of abusing his children and was under stress at the time of Tommy's disappearance, as he had to care for the children while his wife was taking college classes. They theorized that if he did not accidentally shoot Tommy, then he lost his temper and beat him to death. Little Karen was the prosecution's star witness in the case and testified against her father over the course of the 6-week trial. The defense suggested that Karen had been influenced to adopt the storyline that her father had beaten and killed Tommy by her mother. Court documents prepared by the district attorney presented the series of events. Larry Gibson left the family's residence in Azalea at approximately 11:30 a.m. to go for a jog. Tommy followed after his father, who instructed him to wait for his sister to come out of the house. Spotting a cat nearby, Larry purportedly used a pistol to kill it, assuming it to be a stray. When Tommy curiously approached the dead cat, Larry angrily picked him up and carried him to the family's carport, where he proceeded to hit the child in the face multiple times. After realizing that Karen had observed Larry hitting Tommy from the window, he placed Tommy in his patrol car and drove it behind a woodpile on the property, where he placed the child's body in a plastic bag and hid it in the trunk of his vehicle. It was theorized by investigators that after volunteer searchers began looking for Tommy, Larry took the child's body and disposed of it in an area known as Swamp Creek, though his remains were not recovered. Karen claimed that her father threatened her against telling authorities what she had witnessed and felt unsafe to do so until her mother separated from him and they relocated back to Oregon in 1994. Larry was ultimately convicted of second-degree manslaughter in 1995, although he continues to deny any involvement. He was released from prison the next year and started a webpage in 2001 regarding Tommy's disappearance, asking the public for help in finding his son. Tommy's picture is featured in the music video for the song Runaway Train by Soul Asylum. He is the youngest child featured in the video. As of today, Tommy has never been located.